Hello, welcome to Money Matters. I'm David Crowell from Mortgage Network, and I'm going to go back to the subject of tariffs again for this segment of the show. You will be watching in the news. I've talked about this twice already on the show, and I'm following the national and international story quite closely because it is very, very, very interesting. You remember that the United States is, and the Trump administration has proposed a trade embargo on various goods from various countries, with a special focus on China and threatening a series of tariffs and trade embargoes on the European Union. So there's a number of terms here which are all interrelated. One is tariff, which is basically a tax that's placed at port of entry on goods coming into the country. So it makes the goods coming into the country more expensive for the U.S. consumer. It puts, therefore, the producer of the goods, whether it be China or BMW automobile in Germany, it makes the producer of those goods less competitive to a homegrown U.S. producer. The tariff is, therefore, think of it as a tax that's added to the price of goods coming into the United States. That's immediately responded to by the country affected, the producing country affected, placing a tariff on U.S. goods coming into that country. So it's a tit for tat, as tariffs are imposed on both sides. The result of the tit for tat can descend into what's called a trade war, and a trade war is where one unintended consequence after another occurs as countries battle for what they perceive as equity or fairness in the exchange of goods and services, imports and exports. Another of the related concepts is the trade deficit. In President Trump's mind, the imposition of tariffs was necessitated by the trade deficit that the United States carries with various other countries. A trade deficit exists when country A, the United States, imports more from country B, China, imports more goods from China than it exports to China. That trade deficit is significant in the case of the United States and China, and President Trump sees that as a net sum lack of balance or lack of equivalence, as what he refers to as theft. The economists do not see trade deficits in the same way. Most economists see trade deficits as a simple expression of the differences between and the economic power, purchasing power, and differences between two economies. A rich economy, like the United States, is likely to have a trade deficit with most poorer countries, because the United States imports and can afford to import, and U.S. consumers can afford to purchase significantly more than their counterparts in other countries. So economists have argued forever, basically, at least in the modern period, in the 20th century, from post-World War I. From 1920 onwards, economists have argued that tariffs are dangerous, trade restrictions are dangerous, that open and free trade is a natural expression of the economic reality of one country versus another. Interestingly, the next step in the game occurred just yesterday. Today is the 25th of July, I believe, and just yesterday the Trump administration announced $12 billion of emergency aid, $12 billion of emergency aid to farmers, principally those farmers who are growing soybeans, but to farmers in the Midwest who are affected by the most recent round of tariffs and countermeasures coming from China. The price of soybeans, as I told you in the last segment, price of soybeans has gone down immediately 30 or 40% because China has imposed a tariff, and China is a big consumer net consumer of soybeans, and it is seeking markets elsewhere in the world and cutting off the import of soybeans from the United States. This has immediately sparked outrage and failure of farms in the Midwest, which has provoked yet another countermeasure, which is emergency relief, emergency price support, and emergency aid to farmers from the federal government. So that in turn provokes more outrage because it increases its money from its magic money and further increases the national deficit and turns those farmers who only 3 months ago were doing very well. It sent them into a tailspin of a cycle in which prices dropped 30%. They see their farms collapsing, and now it has turned them, it has saved them with the price support and the emergency aid and turned them into welfare participants, welfare recipients. So they're on a roller coaster, and that's what happens in any situation where a trade war exists. A roller coaster of unanticipated, unpredictable events occurs. That's likely to be even more so in our current world order because the international economic system, international supply chains are so much more developed and so much more sophisticated and interdependent than they've ever been before in history. So the unintended consequences that can arise from a trade war in the present circumstances is just unknown, simply unknown. It may be that because trade and the interconnections and the supply chains are so sophisticated now, it may be that the amount of disruption because of a trade war turns out to be relatively minor. In other words, it's easier now than it's ever been before to find alternative markets for goods. On the other hand, it may be because they're so interconnected that the impact is huge from the trade war. So we're seeing lots of excitement, and the net price of goods will be forced up in the United States over the next period of time, which will cause inflation to go up, which will cause interest rates to go up. So it's going to be a very interesting time. That's it for my segment. This is David Crowell, Money Matters, And I'm the Senior Loan Officer at Mortgage Network. This is definitely the time to give us a call about refinancing your property before interest rates go any further. Bye-bye for now.